So the Barrie Colts getting ready for a 3-3 this weekend, and at the tail end of that 3-3, they're going to host the Guelph Storm for their one and only visit. So, who better than to talk with Ryan Drury, the play-by-play voice on Rogers TV, and also the host of the Eye of the Storm podcast? Ryan, how are you doing tonight?
I'm doing well, man. Thanks for having me.
And the Guelph Storm, there's just something about the crimson red when you see that color come into the arena. It's a color that I don't think we use enough in hockey, and it must be quite exciting for you too to be able to see that on a weekly basis.
Yeah, it's a unique scheme for sure. I'm staring at it over on my wall there. I'm in my studio where I do the podcast, and yeah, it's definitely a unique scheme. I like it, and it's become very popular with the fans. I love the old logo too, and they do drag it out from time to time, which is nice to see as well, and celebrate the history. But yeah, that dark maroon red, it just screams Storm to me, and it has for a long time.
And you mentioned the fans; they're pretty passionate. And this weekend, I understand there's going to be a fan bus coming up to the Saddlein Arena, so we're going to have a good contingency of Storm fans.
Yeah, that's become like a big tradition among a number of different fan groups, but the Storm and the Storm Trackers, they've become pretty passionate, like you said, about organizing away trips. I mean, they pretty much do it to almost every away game, bar some of the way up north stuff. But anything that's within a couple hours drive of the Sleeman Center, they're usually organizing an away trip. They of course do Kitchener. They do Owen Sound, London, and Barrie's not that far. So yeah, you'll see a healthy package of people wearing those jerseys at Sadlon.
And with the Guelph Storm, they just the history there is kind of underrated with the amount of championships that they've raised at the Sleeman Center, and also the talent that's made their way to the NHL. Right now, Jet Luchenko playing in the NHL with the Philadelphia Flyers, and the question mark is he going to return to Guelph, or are we looking at a Matthew Poitras situation like last year where he ended up sticking with the Boston Bruins?
Yeah, it's the $1 million question in the Royal City right now, and I think it's one that Guelph fans almost don't want to know the answer to yet. Like they're all, all of us I think are kind of sitting on our hands a little bit because, like, look, we would love to see Jet back in the Sleeman Center and tearing up OHL ice. I mean, he's one of the most skilled players in the league by far, and I assumed, just assuming that if he stuck with the team and didn't make the Flyers out of camp, that he would be one of those guys in line to potentially push 90, maybe even 100 points because he's just so good at creating opportunities that a lot of guys in the league just can't do, particularly at the speed he does it at, which obviously has lent himself well to the NHL. And as we record this night, he's going to play again, and he's going to play on a line with Matvey Michkov and Owen Tippett, and he's going to center that line. So, Philly clearly is trying him in different spots. Ultimately, I think he potentially will return just because, when you have a guy like that where his bread and butter is point generation, and he's not necessarily doing it yet at the NHL level, I think that they're just giving him an extended look. His two-way game's just as good as Matt Poitras. I mean, and that's what got him to stick in Boston. Probably didn't help that they lost two generationally skilled two-way centers in Patrice Bergeron and obviously David Krejci, but that certainly helped Matty out. Jet, I think, ultimately will probably return. If he doesn't, though, like I don't think anybody in Guelph is going to sit there and be upset about it. We're all happy for him and Matt, and like you said, all the guys over the history of the team that have cracked the NHL, there's been a lot of them. And ultimately, that's what this league is all about. And yes, while we would prefer to have him centering that top line and running our top power play, ultimately, it looks good on the Storm and George Burnett and the staff here that have really helped him take his game to another level.
And that just goes to show, like you said, George Burnett, he's done a fantastic job with drafting, getting the young players into that lineup. And, it's kind of unfortunate. Like last season, we saw the Guelph Storm finding the back end of the net was a challenge, but also the health factor. It was just trying to stay healthy. Allen, of course, missed the start of last season. That was a big factor on the blue line. So Guelph, it seemed like last year, just had a hard time getting things going. And this year, we're almost kind of seeing a similar effect here. Maybe not as much on the health side of things.
Yeah, I mean, it's been a challenge for them. And I mean, I know fans are disappointed about the way last season went. I think everybody is. And, when I talked to George midway through the year leading into the trade deadline, which I'll do again this year, and at the end of the year, like and even this year at the start of the year, he was the second or third guy I talked to on the podcast this year. And like he was pretty straight up about his assessment of last year. Like they straight up weren't happy with the way they played, and he wasn't particularly enthused or happy about the way the team went about trying to generate offense, which didn't work on most nights. And um, what does that come down to? I don't know. They clearly felt like coaching was a part of it because Corey Stillman is here now alongside Rob Davison and Scott Simmons. And that's one thing I would preach to fans is, these guys are, again, learning a new system, and Corey likes to do things a little differently. I will say that the team is playing a lot more up tempo than last year. They're still working a lot of things out. The neutral zone's been a problem for them, but ultimately, I think that once they get a grip of this system, they'll start to yield a little bit more in terms of offensive results. It's been a bit of a challenge so far, and health's a factor already too. Quinn Beauchene's out with the knee injury. We're hearing that he's day to day. Hopefully, I mean, it looked really serious when it happened. And he was examined at the hospital, so hopefully he's all right. He did get named to the CHL US Prospect Challenge team, so I doubt he'd get named to that team if he's going to be out long term. But the poor kid had brutal injury luck last year with the broken arm. Cam Allen, like you mentioned, he's come into this year clearly with a chip on his shoulder to remind everybody, hey, I'm pretty good too. He's been Guelph's best player without a doubt. And then, Will Haley gets acquired, breaks his wrist. He's out 4 to 6 weeks, which sucks. So, I mean, yeah, the team has run into bad luck at times, but George was pretty effusive in his assessment of what happened last year, and he didn't want to repeat that this year. So they made some changes, and we'll see how it works.
And you mentioned new head coach Corey Stillman. He has that experience at the NHL level, helping out the Coyotes, and of course with the Sudbury Wolves, he had some success there. So it is going to take time to get that chemistry and to figure out the systems. And it seems like the pieces are in place. It's just waiting for it to click.
Yeah, I think that that's how they feel. And like, look, there's a lot of new faces on this team. I mean, last year they went through the whole thing with Matt Poitras not coming back, whether Jet comes back this year. Even if he does, I think that people think that because Jet is so good and last year Matt was so good that if they had just returned, it was going to just fix everything. Like, oh, we're going to score 1 billion goals now because we've got this incredible player. Well, that incredible player is only going to play 20, 21, 22 minutes. I mean, the rest of the team is what it is, right? So they've got a lot of young players that they're trying to see because of the opportunities that are there with guys graduating to the NHL and other guys aging out. They're trying to see how much of a load they can handle right now. And that's a tough thing when you're dealing with 16 and 17-year-olds. I love Will McFadden. He's 17 years old. Parker Snellgrove, a kid that looks like he can develop into a really good player. He's 17 years old. Their backup goalie, Colin Ellsworth, who I think has a bright future. He's 15. He's not going to turn 16 until December. Like, it's incredible. So you look up and down this lineup, Carter Stevens, Sam Johnston, they've got all these young players that are in place, but they are very young in terms of the Ontario Hockey League. So I think that fans just need to be a little patient. I know that they don't like hearing that word, but look at this roster and give these guys some time. Yes, there's some great talent there in Max Nemesnikov, who's off to a slow start. We know he's better than how he's playing, and so does he. Vilmer Ulrichsen, same thing. These guys will settle into a groove here. Corey Stillman's too good of a coach to not get something out of these guys. I think that we're watching the process of them trying to put the puzzle pieces together.
And I also like the veteran group on this team, the overagers. Like Carabella stands out as one of the players I think that's a little underrated in this league. Probably doesn't get as much credit for what he brings to this Guelph Storm team.
I agree. And like Jake's a passionate guy, and you could tell that the way that the season was going last year wore on him a little bit, because he's the type of guy that has that elite skating ability. He's really fast. That's part of what got him drafted. And is part of what I think will ultimately result in him being a professional player. I know Washington didn't sign him. There's just a log jam
Yeah.
of young forwards in that organization. I mean, it just comes down to being a numbers game. It says nothing about Jake's ability to play pro hockey. And Dallas invited him out to camp this year. He'll get another invite next year, and I wouldn't be shocked if he signed with an NHL team with room on their roster. But you could tell, being as competitive as he is, hometown kid, cares about the organization, that he wants things to go differently. And sometimes he almost tries too hard
Mm.
to shoulder that burden a little bit. But the kid is so smart. He's not all just speed and flash. He's great in the dot. He can create plays. He's got a great shot that I'd love to see him use more. I'm not his coach. I'm not going to tell him that. But he is a guy on this team that is underrated because he doesn't necessarily wow you with some of the plays he makes, but his effort level every single night is consistent, and we see it, and the coaches see it, and that's why he plays a lot.
And last season, there was a lot of one-goal games that the Guelph Storm were in. And one player that really stood out was Gillespie in net. He's obviously a smaller goaltender, but he really made a name for himself last year. And it was just unfortunate that the season ended the way it did in the playoffs against the Greyhounds. As Gillespie, I think from what we've seen so far, he's got great potential as well.
Yeah, and he's a kid that he basically was a guy that they were looking at in the organization playing down with the Air Centennials, and he had great numbers down there in the GOJHL. He was a kid that they saw raw talent there,
Mhm.
and the way he played, because of an injury situation and the goaltending that was there at the time when he first got called up, they basically reached that 10-game mark with him and were like, okay, we have to keep him around. Like, he basically, with the way he played, made the Storm a firm believer in his ability to take the net and run with it. And he has. And I mean, last year, especially early on, like the first couple months of the season, he was one of, if not in the conversation of the best starting goaltender, especially with the volume of shots he was seeing and the volume of shots his team was not generating with their offensive struggles. Like, we were seeing the Storm getting outshot like 32-16 a lot. And
Mhm.
he was there making 29, 30, 31 stops. And I think they almost wore him out a little bit toward the end. It sucked watching him get that lower body injury and only appearing in one playoff game. But that kid, I'm sure he's heard it his whole career. He's a little small for a goalie. Can he play the angles properly? Like, he hears all that stuff,
Yeah.
and he's super competitive too. Quiet dude, but he just goes out there and he lets his play do the talking. And that's why we call him Friday Night Lights in the Royal City, because like when the lights are on, he's ready to perform every single time.
Well, he's definitely someone to take note of for Colt fans this weekend when they take on the Guelph Storm Saturday night. But Ryan, thank you very much for doing this, and hopefully we'll be able to chat with you down the road again soon.
Absolutely, man. Anytime. It was a pleasure to be on.
So it's always great to catch up with fellow broadcasters from around the Ontario Hockey League. Of course, Ryan Drury, the play-by-play voice on Rogers TV for the Guelph Storm, the Storm, they're going to be in town Saturday night. Gene and I will have the call on Rogers TV for Barrie. Puck drop there will be at 7:30, and post-game I'll do a recap on that. And it's always fun when we get these Western Conference teams in the barn, as we don't see them all that often, but the way the scheduling is, just 2 games for interconference play, except for the Owen Sound Attack, but that's for geographical reasons. So again, thanks to Ryan for joining us today to talk a bit about the Guelph Storm. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe. Talk to you again soon.